you're sitting on a bench. You see these insect things going around, like moving around fast in the background. And then this one main being that you feel is female is sitting there with its legs up, staring at you.
Yeah.
And is it communicating? It's asking you, how can I help you stop screaming?
No, there was an automatic voice. A machine was saying that.
Oh, so this wasn't inside you. This was external.
No, it was outside me.
Okay.
It was a voice. I was not in any way prepared to do telepathy at that time. I was too excited and upset to even think about that. I couldn't have done it. I can do it now fairly easily, but no, not at that moment. I didn't even know it existed.
And this is when they're trying to prepare you to, they have this tool and they essentially sodomize you with it.
Yeah, well, what they do is, and it's a known thing. It's not a mysterious thing from the beyond. It's it's used to this day in animal husbandry, and in those days they made these devices that would stimulate the nerve that causes an erection.
Right.
And for people who had erectile dysfunction before Viagra, they would insert this into their rectum and turn this on. It would create a gentle electrical current, and the result was an erection. And then the person could ejaculate, could have sex.
Right.
And as I say, when they're getting semen out of a bull, they do it now. It's a commonplace tool. It's nothing exotic.
So they wanted your semen. They wanted to stick a needle in your brain. And then what else did they do?
Send me the hell home. And I woke up the next morning all upset, not knowing why.
And also during the experience, you said you have no right to do this. And they said, we do have a right.
We do have a right, yes. Yes, what did that mean?
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, there's a lot of possibilities. Maybe it's on some soul level. I don't know. Higher level. If so, they would have been nice if they'd explained themselves at any level, but in any case, they didn't. Well, the other possibility is, what if we did have contact with them back in the past? What if the Eisenhower meeting actually did take place? What if there was an agreement and they did agree to let a certain number of people be dealt with in this way, and I think hybridized? That would be one of the greatest secrets the United States possessed. And, I think that's a possibility too.
That they are crossbreeding humans and their own.
Oh, I know they are, because they did it to me, and I met the child in the woods behind my house.
Your own child.
I guess he was my child. At the time, I didn't know what he was, but I'll tell you the story. I was out walking in the woods one afternoon in August it was hot, and we would leave. We were losing the house, in the process of losing the house. And because, unfortunately for me.
The cabin,
yeah. A writer who's controversial, people will buy. But as soon as he becomes a laughingstock, forget it. They're not going to buy that anymore. They're not going. This is before the internet. They're not going to go to a bookstore and put down money on a book where the clerk's going to snicker at them. And whoever turned me into a laughingstock over the rape. Basically, they turned it into the rectal probe. It shows up on the first episode of South Park as.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And after that, it spread.
So that was the genesis of the anal probe, your story?
Yeah.
No one ever talked about that before you?
No.
Wow.
No.
Oh my God.
And so I've ended up in the situation for 30 years of being laughed at for being, which is an interesting position to be in, believe me, especially because my publishers felt like that story, as it spread, was destroying my sales, because my sales just absolutely dried up. And I wasn't even writing about this anymore. And I was having good sales with some of my books. And then the next thing you know, they just start to die out. And I ended up with no money and no publisher and nowhere to turn. We had to give up the cabin. It was sold out of bankruptcy. We were just destroyed, absolutely. Ann and I had to borrow money from friends to eat at one point. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And so in any case, Where were we?
You were saying that you were walking through the woods and you had a reason to believe that you saw like a hybrid child of yours.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'm walking in the woods, and behind my house, there was a wooded area, then a cleared area going up a hill with a lot of rather rocky, and then beyond that, some pitch pines. And there's this boy sitting under a tree, right, 50 feet from the pitch pines, smoking a cigarette.
A boy.
A boy. He looked like a boy from a distance anyway. And he was a boy, I found out later, but I'll get to that. So I think to myself, what in the world? What's a kid doing out here? And I figured, well, I understand he's out here, so he wants to smoke, and he's not going to be smoking at home. And it's like a 10-year-old or 12-year-old maybe. So I understood.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, but he's too close to those pitch pines. If those things catch fire, this whole area is going to go up like a torch, because pitch pines are full of pitch. That's why they're called pitch pines.
Okay.
And you light one on fire, and whoosh!
Oh, wow.
It just explodes. So I walk over to him, and I start to say, "I'd like you to move," or words to that effect. And I realize as I'm looking down at him, he's like a weathered child. I know that now because he didn't have adequate hydration and he smoked all the time.
Okay.
And I got to know more about him over the next few weeks, you may be sure. And he makes this, he's looking straight ahead. He doesn't look at me, and he goes, "Ugh." And I think to myself, it's more menacing than that.
Yeah.
I think to myself, I'm significantly far back in these woods. And I didn't like that sound, and I don't like this kid at all. I'm getting out of here. And I turn around and go back to the house. And I tell Ann that there's this kid out there, and she says, we should call the sheriff. And I think about that, and then I think, I don't want to call the sheriff because people around here are very sensitive. And if I call the sheriff on one of their children, they're not going to like it, whether the child is doing right or wrong, because I've already got a horrible reputation in the area. Some people who had been doing clearing some poison ivy out of our trees had one of the grays walk across the road in front of them, and then they had these snakes come up around their feet and stuff. And the foreman came up to me and said, "Mr. Strieber, we're leaving. Those people of yours are running around out there, and we don't want anything to do with them." And they left. They wouldn't even take any money from me, and they also didn't finish the job. So that kind of story was getting around the neighborhood, and people weren't happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
They were not pleased. And so I didn't want to have any trouble with anyone with calling a sheriff on their kid.
Okay.
So I let that go. The next thing we know, we're smelling cigarette smoke in the house. And the night, it's warm nights, windows are open. And I'm thinking to myself, is that kid out there? And we begin to find places where he has been standing, and there'll be hundreds of cigarette butts. If it was 20 years later, we could have taken some of these cigarette butts and gotten them DNA tested. Mm. But that wasn't real in those days. You couldn't do that. So I said to Ann, he's out here. And we took a lovely hike. We looked like to hike up to this lake up in the hills. Beautiful. And on the way out in the woods, 3 or 4 miles out in the woods, we're going along and we find one of these places where he's been standing. And we just went home. We realized those woods weren't ours anymore. That we knew by this time that there was something real weird going on. We liked to skinny dip at night, and our pool was very private, so no problem skinny dipping at night. And we would skinny dip frequently. One night after he started in those woods, we were skinny dipping. And remember, the woods behind the house, there was a deck with a pool in it, and then thick brush. And under that brush behind that brush were tall trees. So behind the brush, there was a clear area that you couldn't see into from the deck. And suddenly there's a sound of someone running up and down in that clear area, breaking sticks and gasping. He could not speak. He could only gasp and make mouth noises. I found out later. And we realized it's him. And he's upset about the idea that we are in this pool, naked. And so we went back in the house. We didn't feel comfortable anymore outside because we obviously weren't alone. And this kid was upset, and it was very weird. And we both knew by this time this is no normal child. Because a normal child, no human being can smoke that much and live. And no normal child is in your woods all the time and never seems to be anywhere else. So we lived with him there, coming up to the house, and it was not pleasant. And he came into the house a few times, and he slept a few nights in one of the bedrooms, and we would find the bed unmade, like someone had slept in the morning, and the cigarette smoke everywhere. It was not pleasant. So,
was he smoking in your house?
He smoked in the bedroom, yeah, but apparently with the door closed, because we didn't notice it while it was happening.
So who is this kid?
Well, I'll get to that. Give me some time. We got some time, don't we?
Yeah, we
okay.
got some time.